Hello, everybody, and thanks for being with us today. My name is Bill Martorelli, and I'm a principal analyst with Forrester Research. And to, I guess, start the webinar, I thought I'd begin with a discussion of the importance of the cloud as a mechanism for digital transformation and the role of services in the context of cloud adoption, which is quite considerable. And I'll try to share with you today some of the reasons I believe and the reason I feel that way, using some data from our research, including survey data, as well as data from my many interactions with, let's say, cloud adopters, as well as suppliers of cloud services and products. So, to get the ball rolling, I thought I'd start out with discussing the state of enterprise cloud adoption and really why it's as important as it is. I know there's many motivations that many of you have for moving more aggressively into the cloud. There's been a lot of discussion about various motivations, including those relating to cost, perhaps elimination of data centers, of legacy, let's say infrastructure, as well as software estate. And of course, perhaps more importantly, the idea that in the cloud, we can achieve new efficiencies, new ways of delivering functionality in a manner that is much more rapid and flexible than those that came before. And ultimately, we at Forrester Research believe this represents the real value, not that those others have no value, but this is the ultimate value in the cloud. And that, in fact, cloud not only powers the new connected economy and has for some years, but it is increasingly the way in which enterprises of various kinds can create new digital business ecosystems that place the customer at the center, right? Not as an afterthought. And for this reason, cloud-powered transformation will top the CIO agenda in 2021, as it has during the last several years. Now, in wondering why, right, customers are being drawn to the cloud, I also wanted to lean on perhaps some research that we have collected as part of our surveying, which I indicated before we do on a rather routine basis. And, we asked our survey respondents on a global basis as to why they're interested in moving toward the cloud and migrating to the cloud. Again, this is part of the question of how to get there, right? Obviously, we can choose to build new functionality in the cloud, but we also want to bring, let's say, things that we built in the past into the cloud through the mechanism of cloud migration. And to gain access from the or to the managed services provided by the major public cloud providers, as you can see, is the number one reason why companies are interested in moving in this fashion. And I guess it stands to reason, right? The many functions and features relating to, let's say, development in the cloud, access to database kinds of capabilities, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and many others are certainly a significant draw. But, in addition to that, companies are also very anxious to gain the ability to scale quickly and easily, to shift the focus away from, let's say, reliance on physical infrastructure, to gain, let's say, efficiencies of time. As I indicated on my previous slide, time is of the essence in the digital world, and gaining access to the ability to deliver more rapidly is a profound motivation, particularly in the post-pandemic era. And of course, moving on to additional rationales such as finely grained cost control, as well as getting out of the database business, so to speak, which remains significant interest to many commercial enterprises. But what are the major challenges in migrating to the cloud? What things tend to stand in the way? Well, as you can see on this slide, it's from the same survey done toward the latter part of last year. You know, a lot of the reasons are more or less similar, right, in terms of their magnitude, such as concerns about performance issues, concerns about costs, whether it's costs associated with the migration itself or associated with, let's say, things that you'll need in order to migrate effectively, perhaps in terms of additional products and services, you know, as well as some concerns about you know, let's say availability of applications and data and suitability for migration. But two really stand out. As you can see at the top of the list, training existing staff on cloud services points to a very widespread and significant concern about the ability of existing personnel to affect and to gain the necessary expertise to achieve this migration. Secondarily, the idea that security and compliance, right, that we can, let's say, achieve and conduct migration activities in a way that addresses security and compliance concerns is also a concern of long-lasting importance, particularly for those industries that have a high regulatory hurdle and relatively high security requirements, even though arguably, and I think this is certainly something we see in our work, at the end of the day, the types of security you can achieve within the cloud environment likely outstrip the kind of security that companies can achieve on their own. But nevertheless, concerns are real and persist. Now, looking at additional reasons, just for the sake of completeness, you know, we do see that additional concerns about latency are also of some importance. Yes, data gravity is a real issue, network topology as well, but not concerns that cannot be successfully addressed. But you know, the concerns are rather many. You know, one of the things we feel that is also potentially a hurdle in some cases is, let's say, internal corporate dynamics in terms of gaining the necessary approvals from security teams, gaining the comfort and corroboration from regulatory and security organizations as well, you know, as well as building the widespread, let's say, consensus across all relevant stakeholders that really make for a very successful migration effort. You know, in my work, I talk to many customers who tell me repeatedly that at the end of the day, the challenges for migration and modernization, for that matter, are really not at all on the technical side, but rather on the cultural side, right? And gaining this internal consensus and agreement is really, really the hard part. As you can see, cultural resistance is listed at the relative, you know, and lack of CIO or executive approval, maybe at the bottom of the list, but nevertheless present and can be very, very much a significant obstacle if not successfully addressed. So really summarizing, what's holding companies back, right? And here I list in order of relative importance in our opinion as to what those barriers are, right? And at the top, you know, lack of skills to migrate existing workloads and or modernize legacy applications, right, is a challenge. It may be, you know, if you're a very exciting, let's say, new age economy on the vanguard of technology initiatives, big open source involvement, you obviously may stand a better chance at attracting and retaining these skills than many other kinds of enterprises. But by and large, this is a significant obstacle for many, many companies. And I'll get to what companies can do about it in just a moment. But, you know, in the same token, inexperience with cloud cost models and cloud cost optimization and otherwise technology optimization is also an obstacle. And I think this kind of cuts both ways. On the one hand, we do see companies struggle with the idea of, you know, how do they justify the migration, right? It's one thing and relatively straightforward to, you know, at least articulate a case that favors migration based on reduction in cost, elimination of legacy technology, right? Closing of data centers. But perhaps more difficult in articulating the value side of the equation, right? In terms of, capturing the benefit in a business model of that agility and that expressive power that the cloud environment brings in terms of delivering new functionality. But believe it, it's real, but it may be in many cases hard to demonstrate. In addition, obviously, the difficulty to establish security and compliance policies. Again, it's not necessarily, to actually achieve a secure environment or even a compliant environment in some cases, but to establish the policies can be very challenging. And I think it may be, again, something that tends to hold people back, perhaps in some cases necessarily, but in some cases unnecessarily. And then, the lack of funding, right? Migration, particularly modernization, costs money. We may have to buy new tools, in order to effect the transition, and services as well. And then finally, resistance from existing operations team that are unsure how to manage effectively in the cloud, continues to be a concern, right? As part of the long-term, let's say, convergence of, let's say, traditional operational policies, and enabling them and updating them to work in a more cloud-oriented context. Something, again, that does not happen necessarily overnight. So what do you do about it, right? And I guess, look, there are many things to do about it. Companies are seeking to enhance their skills, seeking to gain experience, seeking to establish these security compliance policies, secure funding, and all the other things. But many companies are also turning to external services providers for help. And I've seen in my own work consistently that enterprises of various kinds not only have turned in many cases to service companies of various kinds for assistance, but have achieved success, at least as indicated by their responses to the very same kinds of surveys that I alluded to before. Now, this is a bit of a different survey, I want to point out. Where the previous survey was so-called infrastructure survey, this is our so-called business and technology services survey. And based on the responses to this particular question, what do you see as primary benefits of using third-party service providers? The benefits are many, right? On the one hand, providers can help complete the work faster. 41% of respondents said that, obviously of great importance in these times, but also provide other benefits, which I guess you could expect, right? Establish or at least lend them the benefit of the best practices that they have learned by working with a variety of different customers. Maybe they're more effective at organizing and let's say delivering enhanced process dynamics than companies might be able to manage on their own, as well as providing, I think that, which is very valuable, providing an external perspective to think about their business and even challenge enterprises. This is another thing I hear from customers that use service providers effectively. Don't just hire them to do what you want them to do. Rather, hire them to tell you where you're going wrong, right? And where you might do better. And, of course, other opinions and other reasons, as you can see, are listed on this slide. And the reasons indeed are many. But, not only are I think the growth of services and the relevance being demonstrated anew in the cloud domain, but it's also, I believe, contributing to a change, a shift in the way that services are being consumed. And I think one of the things that we've seen, particularly in the cloud era, I think this is to some extent been, let's say, accelerated by the post-COVID environment, and that is that organizations are seeking to engage service providers more rapidly in a way that delivers benefits more quickly, and in some cases avoiding the tendency of the past to, let's say, engage in big bang kinds of engagements, that might last a couple of years and only deliver significant value after a lot of time has transpired. And so instead, what we have tended to see evolve is I guess you could say, a sequential adoption pattern, right? In which, let's say, a series of different kinds of activities, as opposed to one overall package of activities, are engaged with on a let's say, an ongoing basis. And I've listed here clockwise the way this sometimes can look, right? On the one hand, customers seeking assistance in planning, in terms of strategy, maybe designing their cloud migration, let's say, strategy or waves, if you will, followed by specific other activities that are, let's say, either oriented to build, migrate, modernize, and even ultimately to ongoing operations. Now, there's no one way to do this. It doesn't have to be clockwise, but certainly the idea that services can be bought and are being bought in, let's say, smaller chunks on a more dynamic and flexible basis is a trend we've definitely seen, and to some extent is accelerating as we move further and further into the cloud. Perhaps even more surprisingly than simply observing that services are valuable and continue to be of value to companies that are embarking on major cloud initiatives is a recognition on the part of customers that indeed engaging with third-party service providers is one of the most powerful things that they can do in terms of having an impact on their overall digital transformation. And again, here I'm citing from our, let's say, Technographics Business and Technology Services survey. And as you can see, some 36% said that, of respondents said that working with third-party service providers is, let's say, as powerful in affecting and improving the digital transformation than even using cloud wherever possible. And of course, others, such as involving employees early on in the process, using agile processes, and others that you can see on this slide. So in summing up, I think it's clear that the challenge presented by the cloud is tantalizing, but also daunting, right? In the sense of so many of us, or so many enterprises, are seeking to do effectively three things at once, right? On the one hand, adapting to new cloud native application development, how to build applications in a truly cloud native way so that it can be, achieve not only the benefits in terms of more rapid delivery of key business functionality, but also provide more flexibility in terms of where those new cloud native applications can run. And this has obvious implications on staffing, right? And some of the skills issues we talked about before. But it goes beyond that, right? Companies are also migrating existing infrastructure to the cloud, right? And let's say, enabling a self-funding model by which elimination of legacy technologies, reduction in the technical debt can free up investment funds that then can be leveraged for greater application migration and modernization, and of course infrastructure modernization as well. And finally, of course, enterprises are seeking to modernize existing legacy applications to take what still provides business value, even in a more traditional context, and move it to the cloud, whether to move first, then improve, right, or improve while moving. It remains a matter of individual circumstance. And so where are we? In summary, I'll say this. I mean, IT leaders are at different stages of the journey. I think this is to be expected and not to be concerned about. We feel and we see a lot of clients that are still at the relatively front end of the process, right? Beginning the journey by, let's say, gaining a better understanding of the full inventory of their applications, eliminating redundancies where possible, as well as trying to understand the dynamics of business value in terms of, let's say, optimizing resources against their ongoing application modernization needs. Others perhaps are a little further ahead, right, in terms of, let's say, completing the analysis. They've begun to strip out legacy code, reclaim business rules, and move them forward into the cloud environment, but perhaps, again, have only gone, let's say, so far and are still in the process of moving, let's say, some of their real core workloads, and indeed have a lot further to go. And then finally, there are organizations that are really leading the charge, right, that have, let's say, largely succeeded in migrating most of their workloads to the cloud, modernizing substantially, and are now moving to the new frontier presented by artificial intelligence and machine learning and building these into their applications. I'm surprised in some of the work I've done recently, I've been surprised to learn that even companies that are perhaps in the middle of their ongoing migration journey, nevertheless are quite active in adopting not only the cloud native styles of development we'd expect, right? API driven, containers, serverless, but also are very aggressive in exploring the possibilities of artificial intelligence and machine learning and how it can contribute to additional business agility and value. And as I argued before, I believe that the effective dynamic and partnership with service providers is one way in which many of these enterprises are moving themselves forward. So that concludes my comments. And now with that, I'd like to turn it to Anu to discuss Customer Enablement Services.
Thank you, Bill. My name is Anu Kohli, and I run product marketing for AWS's portfolio of Customer Enablement Services. In this next section, I will talk to you about how AWS's Customer Enablement Services help augment your team's cloud skills by delivering deep AWS expertise where, when, and how you need it. So, AWS's Customer Enablement Services help you migrate and build faster in the cloud. We have several different services that help customers get projects started faster, build high-performing applications more quickly, and continuously optimize costs. Let's start with AWS Managed Service. This is a service that helps you operate your AWS infrastructure, where we go in and we run your AWS infrastructure for you on your behalf. We have Training and Certification, which helps build skill and validate expertise through certifications. Then I come to one of the very important parts of this ecosystem, which is our partner network. AWS partners complement and extend our customer enablement services, giving you the broadest set of assistance options to achieve your goals in the cloud. AWS IQ offers on-demand help from AWS certified third-party experts. Our support services offer people, technology, and programs that are proactive as well as reactive. And then lastly, but not the least, is professional services, which are packaged offerings to accelerate business outcomes. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to double click on some of these for some more detail. Let's start with professional services. AWS professional services are packaged offerings based on best practices developed over thousands of engagements that we've had with our customers. We offer these across several different practices, such as migration, advisory, security and infrastructure, modernization, industry and verticals, and emerging technologies like AI, ML, blockchain, and IoT. Skipping over to support, AWS Premium Support comes in several different tiers. We have 3 tiers of support based on different levels of help that our customers need. Enterprise support includes consultative architectural guidance and a designated technical account manager that can help run through different problems that you may have with your business. Moving on to managed services. Like I said before, AWS Managed Services is where we help operate your AWS infrastructure on your behalf. We do this by taking on the undifferentiated heavy lifting so that you can focus on things that really matter for your business. This includes things like provisioning and onboarding, monitoring and alerting, patching, and backup. These are things we will do for you on your infrastructure so that your engineers can go build the true needle-moving services that you need. Finally, training and certification. AWS Training and Certification offers customers resources to quickly advance their team skills and knowledge through digital and classroom training and also through certifications. I'm now going to hand this over to Casey from Forrester to cover the total economic impact findings from the study that we just talked about.
Great. Thanks, Anu. Again, my name is Casey Suratnik, and I'm a consultant at Forrester. It's a pleasure to be here and have an opportunity to walk everyone through the findings of this total economic impact study. As a roadmap for this part of the presentation, I'll first discuss what a TEI is and how we developed the study. Then I'll go into the major findings of the study itself with the executive summary, followed by highlights from the rest of the analysis. I say highlights because I won't be able to get into every detail of the analysis here. So if you're interested in learning more, I recommend you take a look at the full study published on the AWS website. There will be a link to the exact location at the end of the presentation. For some context, TEI stands for Total Economic Impact, and it's based on a Forrester proprietary methodology that goes a couple steps beyond typical TCO and ROI analyses, and I'll explain how. First, though, through our research, Forrester has found that next-level business case justifications are becoming increasingly important for technology investments, with over 90% of IT decision makers in North American enterprises seeing their value. Coming back to what sets TEI apart, when we think about a next level or effective business case, we mean something that goes beyond TCO or ROI as standalone analyses. And why is that important? Well, TCO, or total cost of ownership, although a very commonly used analysis method, is limited in that it only looks at how much a solution like the AWS Customer Enablement Services will cost an organization. ROI, or return on investment, takes it a step further in quantifying benefits as well as costs. But then TEI introduces levels of risk and potential strategic impacts as additional dimensions to the business case quantification and analysis. Here you can see visually how a TEI case study looks at ROI in terms of tangible business benefits. Think expedited project timelines and avoided additional resource costs, and costs that can range anywhere from annual fees to AWS or other third-party vendors, as well as internal resource time spent on the investment, all filtered through the lens of risk and uncertainty around the investment. We also evaluate long-term outcomes such as scalability and flexibility in terms of what new paths are opening to you now that you have the technology in place. The idea is to provide a realistic and conservative technology assessment that you should feel confident using. So how do we get there? To build a TEI case study, there is a multi-step process. We started with a series of conversations with AWS and Forrester experts to lay the foundation for the conversations we ultimately have with AWS customers. In these conversations, we ask what benefits they've experienced to date, what they expect to see in the future, and why they felt as if the AWS Customer Enablement portfolio of services would best deliver on that value. The key takeaway here is that we're not theorizing about the benefits companies could see with AWS Customer Enablement Services, which span AWS Managed Services, Professional Services, Enterprise Support, and Training and Certification. We talked to 7 real customers about their real deployments and the associated benefits that they have either already seen or expect to see in the future from engaging with the various CE portfolio services. Another important part of our process is creating a composite organization. This is where we aggregate all the information we collected during the interviews and shape it into a representative organization that you can compare your own company to. In the end, we write the final case study, which includes the results from the financial model, as well as the overarching customer journey, both of which we'll overview for you during this presentation. Before we do that, though, we have some housekeeping to take care of. All of these disclosures are listed in the study itself, but what's important to note here is that although AWS provided the names of the organizations for Forrester to interview, they were not involved in the interviews themselves, and the individual interview data remains confidential. AWS also reviewed Forrester's findings, but Forrester maintains editorial control over the study. Now on to our high-level findings. What we know, and confirmed through Bill's presentation, is that companies use cloud to build new and compelling customer experiences, modernize aging applications, and drive down infrastructure costs. But in order to do all of this at once, to build new apps, to transform existing apps, and to migrate infrastructure and data from on-prem to the cloud, organizations need guidance. They want to understand cloud services, they want to migrate workloads quickly and securely, and they want to manage all of those applications easily at a large scale. All of this is under the larger goal of transforming into a more agile, customer responsive, and cloud native organization. AWS Customer Enablement Services augment customer cloud skills with deep AWS expertise, dedicated resources, modern tech, and hands on guidance through AWS Professional Services, Managed Services, Enterprise Support, and Training and Certification to help them achieve those goals. That brings us to the purpose of our discussion today. AWS commissioned Forrester to conduct this total economic impact study and examine the potential return on investment enterprises may realize by engaging with the various customer enablement services to help achieve their cloud transformation goals. As we walk through the output of this study, I have a few business case definitions to share. Present value, or PV, which represents the present or current value of both costs and benefits given at a discounted rate. The present values for cost and benefits feed the NPV, or net present value, which represents the future net cash flows given at a discounted rate. Discounts provided for present value and net present value are to indicate that money is worth more today than it is down the line in the future. Finally, return on investment, or ROI, is the project's expected return in percentage terms, and it's calculated by dividing net benefits, or benefits less costs, by cost. Typically, a positive NPV and a positive ROI indicate that an investment should be made. Please keep in mind that the values you see on your screen are strictly related to the value of the AWS Customer Enablement Services, and they do not include the additional benefits of moving to the cloud in general. So with that caveat, the financial results of our report, in summary, look like this. We calculated an ROI of 136% and a net present value, or benefits over costs, of $16.2 million. We're now going to take a closer look at what's going into that financial model. As I mentioned, for this study, Forrester interviewed 7 AWS customers. The customers on your screen represent a variety of industries across many geographical locations. They also engaged with a variety of the customer enablement services to achieve their cloud transformation goals, which spanned both migration efforts from on-prem to the cloud, as well as cloud native development. The customers' shared experiences are aggregated together to influence that composite organization, upon which the financial analysis for our case study is based. In order to create the composite organization, we analyzed key commonalities in the customer journeys across our 7 customers that led them each to make the investment in the various customer enablement services. The project goals across our customer interviews can be synthesized into the following categories. They wanted to build cloud native applications quickly to enhance innovation efforts. They wanted to migrate legacy applications out of data centers to save on the associated infrastructure costs, and they wanted to do so with as minimal risk of failure as possible to avoid any additional downstream costs to the organization. They also needed a way to operate their AWS cloud environment for cloud native and migrated applications efficiently with the resources they had on hand, all the while ensuring security best practice throughout the journey. Additionally, they wanted to bring their existing resources along for the ride and enable them to participate with confidence through training and certification. AWS services were leveraged to supplement in-house cloud talent, build up where there were skills gaps on internal teams, and streamline cloud knowledge and development strategies that powered cloud transformation. Once the customers engaged with the various AWS services in this way, they were able to achieve their goals, as you can see through the key results listed here. Before we dive into the benefit categories, I wanted to highlight a few of our composite assumptions. For one, we're talking about a global billion-dollar industry-agnostic organization that wanted to become a cloud-first org to better meet business needs by, again, migrating their legacy on-prem environments to the cloud and standing up a cloud environment that was both secure and efficient for native development. As part of the migration journey, we assume the composite migrates 5,000 legacy servers to the cloud and builds cloud-native apps in parallel. Therefore, we're talking about a cloud environment that has thousands of applications that require management and maintenance. And our organization is working with an internal DevOps team that consists of 25 FTE. We also had to make some assumptions about the usage of the various CE portfolio services as part of our composite organization. Anu covered each of these services and the variability across their use cases in her piece of the presentation. But for the purposes of our composite or hypothetical customer journey, we assume the following. AWS Professional Services are used to migrate a small initial set of applications to the cloud, therefore ensuring success and providing a path forward that includes documentation for future migration efforts. Additionally, professional services teams are deployed to help build cloud-native applications that are larger, more complex projects, or those where the composite org does not have available resources to tackle it on their own. Amazon Managed Services provides 24/7 monitoring in the cloud for critical applications. By lending AWS resources and tools to assist in the operational effort in the cloud and helping build landing zones and obtain compliance certifications as needed. Not every application is a target for managed services, so for the remaining applications, there's always enterprise support that provides continuous operational support and identifies issues and mitigates incident impacts. Finally, in parallel, the organizations utilize training and certification to build up their internal skills. And now that we've set the stage, let's dig into the benefits that the composite organization realized as a result of using the customer enablement services as described. We'll talk to each of the benefits you see on your screen in turn. Up first, we have cost savings from accelerated migration to the cloud. The migration goal was to migrate legacy servers out of on-premise data centers to their new cloud environment quickly. If the organization had opted to migrate with in-house teams, decision makers would have utilized internal resources to perform all of the migration work from setting up the landing zones and onwards. And they faced skill gaps, as well as finite resources that had varying existing priorities, both of which could ultimately result in delayed timelines. With a combination of AWS ProServe and Amazon AWS Managed Services, the composite organization migrated legacy apps to the cloud 12 months sooner and recovered the associated data center costs for those additional months, which totaled just over $2 million over the 3-year investment. A parallel project goal was to optimize existing cloud apps and develop cloud-native applications quickly, so as to further business transformation efforts. Without AWS Customer Enablement Services, the organizations face similar resource restrictions around available skills and dedicated time that compromise not only project success rates, but also delivery timelines. With a combination of professional services, enterprise support, and training and certification, the organization had more project success, therefore less rework, and were able to compress project timelines by 3 months for large projects and by 1 month for smaller projects. As such, development cost savings totaled just over $8 million in the 3-year investment. As we've touched upon, the organization faced resource challenges that barred them from utilizing all in-house resources to migrate and build in the cloud environment, at least initially. Therefore, they engaged AWS Training and Certification to skill up internal employees as a parallel effort. Without training and certification, the organization would have had to shop around to various vendors to meet the training requirements. With AWS, the organization streamlines the training and certification effort through a single vendor, thereby reducing spend on training by 15% and scaling up large volumes of resources about 12 months faster. The total cost savings from the cost reduction for the additional 12 months totaled just over $700,000 over the 3 years. With all of these applications running in the new cloud environment, the organization knew they were going to need support for their existing development operations resources to help manage and maintain them. A combination of professional services, AMS, enterprise support, and training and certification enabled development operation teams to be more efficient by lending problem-solving support, expertise, and best practice guidelines that made them 50% more efficient. The time savings totals $2.3 million over the 3 years, not to mention that time can now be redeployed to more value-add activities, such as taking on more cloud-native development projects and the like. With all of this work going on, the migration effort, the build effort, and the resulting operational load in the cloud, the organization is trying to skill up internal resources to meet demand and take over future cloud work as quickly as possible. However, in the interim, professional services and Amazon and AWS Managed Services resources lent by AWS allowed the organization to move the cloud transformation process forward without adding unnecessary headcount, thereby avoiding hiring 20 additional FTE that would have included anything from a cloud architect to additional development operations team members, and saving the org just over $7 million in 3 years. So we've talked about the migration effort and the cost savings from moving out of legacy data centers sooner, but there is additional cost savings in moving to the cloud for legacy applications in the avoided management infrastructure fees. In the new cloud environment, the applications are largely managed by Amazon AWS Managed Services, which provides their own tooling for application management. As such, the organization experiences a 20% reduction in management infrastructure spend compared to their on-premise environment that totaled just over $5 million over the 3 years. Cloud transformation journeys can be intimidating, especially when it comes to the goal of maintaining security of a new type of environment. AWS lends expertise, technology tools, and best practice that actually improve security by reducing the possibility of a security breach from the added automations and faster incident response times experienced with the AWS services. The resulting cost savings totals $1 million over the 3 years. Organizations also wanted to improve performance of their end systems now running in the cloud. With AWS Managed Services managing some set of their business applications, the organization improved patching success rates, reduced the volume of major security incidents experienced, and expedited incident response times. To measure this impact, Forrester assumes that the applications managed by Managed Services for our composite support e-commerce channels. As such, the 2 hours of improved uptime per month results in incremental profit of just under $500,000 over the 3 years. We've already discussed how AWS Customer Enablement Services expedite the migration process, which leads to cost savings relating to the legacy environment. Additionally, with the AWS CE services, the organization has more confidence in the project's success, which is huge when you think about the millions of dollars of investment that this kind of project requires. The best practice and hands-on support provided by various AWS services throughout the migration timeline reduced the risk of a migration failure by 5%, which avoided wasting costs for resource time spent and cloud environment provisioning on a failed effort that totals just under $300,000 in 3 years. In addition to all of the benefits we were able to put a number to, customers also talked about the benefits to using the AWS Customer Enablement Services that they couldn't necessarily quantify. The overall purpose of a cloud transformation journey, as we've mentioned, is to power innovation. Being in the cloud is the best way to promote business transformation through innovation, and AWS helped these customers get there. Additionally, internal teams had more confidence in their ability to build and operate in the cloud to help drive this business transformation forward, which also encouraged them to continue to engage in more cloud projects. So who wins in the end? Well, the end customers through better performance and more changes geared towards their need. And this was reflected for many of the customers that we interviewed through improved NPS scores and the like. This one requires a bit of an explanation. At Forrester, flexibility represents the strategic value an organization can obtain for some future additional investment, building on top of the initial investment already made. The value of flexibility is unique to each customer, especially as there are multiple scenarios in which a customer might implement a customer enablement service and later realize additional uses and business opportunities through their continued partnership with AWS. The future benefits stem from in-house teams working side by side with AWS experts and learning best practices of operating the AWS environment. This valuable knowledge stays within the organization and it can be leveraged for future cloud projects. As the partnership with AWS Customer Enablement continues to grow, decision makers receive more prescriptive guidance, further amplifying certain benefits their organizations gain from engaging with the different services. Specific benefits will, of course, depend on which service they engage with and where along the cloud transformation effort they choose to engage with them. Thus, the initial investment continues to provide exponential benefits for future cloud initiatives. As you'd probably expect, the interviewed organizations incurred several costs from engaging with AWS for the various services. The fees paid to AWS will vary greatly depending on the size and scope of the cloud transformation project, as well as the services utilized throughout that journey. For details on the assumptions that we've built into our model to get to this level of cost, please read the full study. In addition to the fees paid directly to AWS, though, there are other cost considerations that are not quantified for the purpose of this case study, but that might be relevant to the overall cloud transformation journey and should be considered, including any resource time spent by internal resources for project and vendor management, time spent on training by employees, any additional professional services, resources utilized outside of AWS, and T&E costs for those various service providers. That covers the high-level details of the benefits we analyzed. And here's a rehash of the numbers I showed you earlier. Taking into consideration the benefits we just discussed, along with the required investment in AWS, we calculated a 3-year ROI of 136% and a net present value of $16.2 million. If you're interested in learning more behind the actual math or digging deeper into any of our assumptions, the full study goes into all of that detail along with a discussion of our methodology and some great customer quotes. And that concludes the TEI portion of our webinar. Thank you again for having me. And I will pass it back to Anu for final questions and closeout.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you guys for attending this webinar with us. For more information on the Forrester Total Economic Impact white paper for customer enablement, we have a link here that you can use to download that white paper. Also, to learn more about our customer enablement services, please visit us on aws.amazon.com/customer enablement. Thank you.